everybody, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com, and today I want to share a very fun card that I think I'm calling a Peekaboo Fun Fold card. You can see why it's a Peekaboo because it has the die cut in the front, and then we've got a very fun fold that allows us to put some beautiful designer series paper on the inside of the card. And as you can see from the products that I have showing on the card, I am using many things from the Hello Ladybug bundle, and that includes a really wonderful punch and a great stamp set. There are a lot of wonderful images in the stamp set and some nice sentiments, and the punch corresponds with a lot of the shapes that you can see as well. But I would like to just dive in. I think it's easiest to just start making the card, and you can see exactly how to do it, and I really hope that you will give this card a try. The first thing that I suggest when you are thinking about doing a card like this is to pick your designer series paper first. That's kind of backwards for me. Usually I pick out the cardstock that I'm going to use, and then I pick out the other parts. But I really think that in order to make this work and have the colors sort of all come together, the best way to start this is to pick your designer series paper. And I have fallen in love with the collection that is from the mini catalog. This is the collection that is called Flowering Fields, and it is all about tulips and beautiful spring colors, perfect for this time of year. And when you choose the designer series paper for this project, there's something that you need to keep in mind, and that is that you're going to see both sides of the same piece of paper. So when I made this particular card, I had one piece of designer series paper, and you can see that both sides have a pattern. And when we go through and we make this card, both sides of the same piece are going to show on the inside and on the outside. So when you're choosing the piece that you're going to use, the designer series paper, just take a minute and kind of look on both sides and make sure that the patterns will work together. And I think these colors do work together well. So I'm going to actually use this design rather than the one that I just showed you to make an example for you. You're going to need one piece of 12 by 12 designer series paper, and once you've settled on the designer series paper, go ahead and choose your cardstock, and you'll need half a sheet of your cardstock. On this one I chose Just Jade, and I'm sure you know that when you buy designer series paper, what's really nice is on the back of the collection there's a list of the different colors, so you can really very easily match the shades that you're going to see in the paper with your cardstock. So designer series paper, piece of cardstock, color cardstock, and also make sure that you have some white cardstock. We're going to use that for some of our sentiments and also some die cutting. Now, this may look a little daunting, and it's not meant to, and I will post a PDF of this. But this is the basic way that you are going to cut your 12 by 12 designer series paper. You're going to end up with 5 pieces. You're going to end up with a piece that is 2 3/4 by 5 1/4, another piece that is the exact same size. You're going to have 2 additional pieces that are the same size. They're going to be 9 1/4 by 5 1/4 up here and down here. And then what will be left in the middle is a piece that is 1 1/2 by 12. And the reason I made this note about the way to orient your design, and let me just show you an example. I'll bring back that piece that I'm going to use to make the sample card. When I cut my paper, and I'll show you how I did this, I cut it so the design is going in this direction. And that's what I mean by the design going in the upward direction. I wouldn't want my tulips to be showing in this orientation, it would look like they're growing to the left, and obviously I wouldn't want them showing like they're growing down. So again, that's just to give you a kind of a visual of how you would orient the card to cut your paper. Okay? So when you cut, you're going to start with a piece of 12 by 12, and this is 12 by 12. You're going to orient your paper in your paper cutter so your design is facing this way. And again, that's why I've got the arrow pointing to the left. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to cut your paper at 5¼ inches all the way. And you're going to end up with a piece that is 5¼ by 12 inches. Then you're going to cut at 1½ inches on the remaining part. And you will get a 1½ by 12 inch strip. And then you're going to be left with a piece that is 5¼ by 12. So you start with a full sheet of paper, you end up with 3 pieces of paper. And I'm going to focus on 2 of those pieces that you will have. You're going to have one that is 9¼ by 5¼ and you're going to have one that is 2¼ by 2¾ by 5¾ and I'm going to cut that piece to that size. And those are the 2 pieces that we are going to primarily use when we are making this card. They are going to be the pieces that go on the front, and they are also going to be the pieces that we're going to put on the inside of our card to make sure that we have a continuous design. And it really does come together pretty quickly and pretty easily. So I've got my 2¾ by 5¼ I have my 9¼ by 5¼ and I'm going to start with those 2 pieces. So I'm just going to take those off of the area that gave you the dimensions. And the first thing that we are going to do on this card is we're going to use the larger piece. So we're going to start with a piece that is 9¼ by 5¼ and we're going to make the inside first. I'm using a slightly different pattern when I'm showing you the example, but the piece that we're working on right now is the piece that is going to go on the inside of the card. And for that, you're going to want to pull out your scoring board. And there are only 3 places that we're going to score our piece of paper. And we're going to make those scores on the 9¼ inch side. And you can see by my little cheat sheet, and I will definitely make sure that these measurements are in the description when I post this video to give you some more information. But there are 3 score lines. One is at 1¼ the second is at 5¼ and the last one is at 8 inches. Before you make those score lines, there are 2 things to make sure that you are doing. One is when you're looking at your paper, you're looking at your design, make sure that the pattern that you're seeing is the one that you want to have as the primary design when the card is open. So in other words, when I made the score lines on this sheet of paper, I was looking at the tulips, just like I'm looking at the tulips right now. If I wanted the primary design to be more of a muted background, I would turn my paper this way. But I definitely want the tulips to be the star of the show in this particular case. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're making score lines onto designer series paper, you want to be a little gentle with your stylus. You don't want to press incredibly hard because you could actually tear the paper. So be gentle. If you need to go back and score to get your score line really well defined, that's fine. Just don't overdo it to begin with. So I just did my 1¼ now I'm doing my 5¼ and I'm definitely taking a little bit easy on here, and then I'm going to come into my 8 inches. So those are the 3 score lines that I need on this sheet of paper. And now I'm ready to put together the centerpiece for the card. You definitely will need a good bone folder in order to get a nice burnish on this. And the way that we're going to make our folds is I'm looking at this, so I have my 1 1/4, my 5 1/4, and my 8. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold that 1 1/4 toward the center. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my bone folder and give this a really nice burnish. And I do want to get it as flat and as straight as I can. So I'm also sort of taking a look at the top and the bottom and trying to make that as aligned as possible. Then I'm going to come over to that 5 1/4 inch score line, and I'm going to fold that back toward the left. And again, I'm going to try and make sure that that is as straight as it can be when it folds down. And I'll go ahead and burnish that as well. So I'm giving this a nice crease. This is going to be the card that is inside the card, if you want to think of it that way. The 3rd score line is the one that's all the way over to the right side of where we started. So I folded this in half. That was the 5 1/4 inch. And now at that 8 1/4 inch, I'm going to fold it backwards. And what you're going to end up with, and you can double check to make sure that you have your scores and your folds correct, is when you have this completely scored and folded and burnished, you're going to see the same pattern on the outside, and then you're going to see the other pattern in the middle. And then when I open this up, I'm going to see that I have the tulips as the main focal point, just like I wanted. We can go ahead and do a little bit of gluing on this just to get it ready, and we'll put it off to the side in just a minute. So what I'm doing here is I want to, let me show you the final card. I want to adhere this flap down, so that's this one right here. And I also want to adhere the flap on the left down. And that would be obviously this flap. Just one thing to keep in mind when you do this, I'm using liquid glue. I really like green glue. You don't need a lot of glue when you are putting this flap down, and you don't need to go close to the edge. If you do, you might get some oozing of glue, and it could get a little bit messy. And you also don't need to put anything down right by where you've scored. It's going to hold when you put the glue on the 3 sides, and you can just press that down. Okay? So that was the flap that is going to be on our right. And now I'm going to go ahead and adhere the one that is going to be on the inside of the card. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the bottom, on the outside, but not really close to the edge, and then on the top. And then I can go ahead and fold that in and just give that a little bit of a burnish with my hand. So we already have the inside card done. And for right now, you can go ahead and you can put that card to the side. We will be using that in a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and stick that over to the side. So the pieces that we have left at this point to work on, we have our card base, and that was cut to 8 1/2 by 5 1/2. It's a standard A2, and like I mentioned, this is just jade. And this is the piece that was the designer series paper cut to 2 3/4 by 5 1/4. So the first thing that I want to do on this is I want to just score and prep my piece as an A2 card base. I'm going to grab my scoring board one more time, and this is the typical score line that we all know when we're doing an A2 card. So we're going to go at half the distance of 8 1/2, which is 4 1/4. So I'm just going to come to that 4 1/4 mark, and I'm going to give that a score. And I will take that off, and I'm going to go ahead and burnish this. And I do want to make sure that I get it nicely burnished. This will end up being the real card base that we will use. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create the front of the card. And again, let me bring in the final card that I had at the beginning, and let's do a side by side. So let's compare where we are on the card we're making. We've done the inside. The inside of this card is the same designer series paper as on the front, so you can see how that mimics what we've already done. And if you look at the outside of this card, you can see that there are two pieces of designer series paper. One of them, the one on the right, is the one that we started with, and this is the 2 3/4 by 5 1/4. The second piece is actually going to come from that center that we cut out from the 12 by 12. So if I bring back in my little diagram, you'll remember that when you cut out your 5 pieces, you're left with a strip that is 1.5 inches wide by 12 inches long. That's what this piece represents from the designer series paper that I cut. This is the other side of this paper. So what I need to do is I need to cut this piece down so that it will become the second part of the front, and I will be able to glue those two together. So let's just think about this for a second. We have a piece that is 12 inches long. We obviously don't need 12 inches. We need it to be 5 1/4. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to cut that down to 5 1/4 inches long. The beauty of this is when you cut that original designer series paper piece, you are going to end up with enough pieces to actually put together 2 cards. And this piece, the piece that I have as extra, this is my 5 1/4. This piece is actually 6 3/4. That's plenty to use on the second card that I can get out of that piece of designer series paper. So now I have a piece that is 1.5 inches by 5 1/4. It is going to be a smidge too wide to go on the front of this card. This is going to be a tad too wide to work. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to cut it down just a little bit. And you're going to want to cut this strip to be 1 1/4 inches wide. So you can either think of it as cutting it to 1 1/4, or you can think of it as taking off 1/4 inch. Whichever way you want to do it, that is how you're going to actually just trim that off so that it will be the right size for you to make your card. And I don't know if you guys do this, but as I am looking at how these colors work together, and this is why I like to have some extra pieces of paper next to where I'm working, I am wondering if I would even like the card base to be that Highland Heather color rather than the Just Jade. And I know some of you are going to say keep it with Just Jade. Some of you are going to say it looks better with the Highland Heather. I'm going to make a really quick decision here. And I'm going to go with I'm going to stick with the Just Jade. We're going to see how that works when I'm done. And sorry to do that, but I bet that is something that you do as well. And hopefully that wasn't too painful to watch. So we are at the point where we now have the pieces to create our card front. But again, let's pause because we're going to end up die cutting into that card front. So when we do that, we need to be careful where we're putting glue, and this will make better sense in just a minute. Essentially what I want to do is I want to glue these 2 pieces onto my card base so that they will end up looking like this. and I don't want to move those pieces around too much when I'm getting my glue together and all of that. So what I find is the best way to do this is to put the pieces down just like this, and I'm going to glue the larger one first. So I'm going to put my fingers on the small piece, and I'm going to grab the large piece, and I'm just going to put my card over to the side while I put the glue on. Now I'm going to be cutting a die shape kind of right in here, and I don't want to have glue all over the paper that will be die cut, because I'm also going to use the circle that will be cut out of the cardstock as part of the card. That means I just need to be a little bit careful where I put the glue. So again, I'm going to put it on the top. Try not to ooze it out, and the bottom. And then when I put this piece back, this is the side. This side on my right now is going to be butted up against the other piece of Designer Series paper. That's where I don't want the glue. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this side a little bit. And then I will pick up this piece, turn it so that I'm holding it. I'm right-handed, and this is how I find it easy for me to do. I'm going to hold this piece down, and I'm literally going to push that larger piece right up against the piece on the left. And because I'm using liquid glue, I have the ability to move this around and try to get it centered. All right, and I'll go ahead and burnish that. Because I'm right-handed, I find it easier to, on the second pass, use my right hand and push the paper in. But it's really how it works for you. So again, I'm going to turn that over, and I will put glue on the top, or in this case it's really the bottom, even though it looks like the top. And then I'm going to kind of pause and think about, okay, when I put this back, this side is going to be where the seam is. That's where I don't want the glue. So I'm going to put the glue on this side of the paper. And if you have any doubt, just double check before you put that down, and that will help you. You can also put a little mark or something too if you want to, just to give you a visual reminder. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm just butting that piece right up against what I've already glued down, and I'm going to go ahead and burnish that. Okay, so this is where we are at this point. And now what we need to do is we need to make a die cut. You can use any shape. You could, obviously circles, squares, rectangles, ovals, any shapes that are what you want the design to show off. And one thing that you might want to think about is what you would put on this little peekaboo piece, the piece that is going to be on the inside of your die cut. Think about that as you're deciding what shape you want to use. I find circles are really forgiving because there's no right side up or wrong side down or anything. I don't have to worry about if it's a square, and if I'm getting it perfectly squared, I don't need to worry about that. So what I'm going to do, and I've already done this off camera, is I am going to run this through my die cutting machine. Before I pretend to do that though, I want to show you that I purposely chose 2 concentric dies because I am going to be doing something with the outer one in just a minute. But I'm taking the smaller piece and I'm going to run this through my die machine. But before I do that, let's just make sure of one thing, and that is that you unfold your card. When you run this through your die cutting machine, you only want a circle, a hole, in the front of your card. You don't want to put a hole in the back of your card. So when I did this one, I opened it up completely and I ran it through with just one layer of cardstock and the Designer Series paper. So I would eyeball this. You don't need to be precise. It really is not going to matter. And I'm going to go ahead and run that through my die cutting machine. Now what you are going to notice when I do this is that I am changing the paper that I have used to this point. I wanted to focus on the technique rather than focusing on you watching me die cut and things like that. So I did do some preparation ahead of time. And what is going to happen when you end up die cutting this piece is you're going to end up with that hole that you're looking at, and then you're going to get these pieces. That's what's going to pop out, right? Because you've put this through your machine, and the die is going to cut not only the cardstock, but you're also going to have your pieces of designer series paper. And because there was no glue on these, it's not going to stick. You're going to be able to just pull them off really easily. So the circle we're going to use. We're going to be using that for some decoration. We'll do that in just a minute. But I now have the kind of the front of my card pretty much all set. And I'm going to bring back in the inside. You're going to notice that, like I mentioned, I did some prep ahead of time, and the colors have changed from what I showed you originally. This is the one that I did with you. This is the exact same thing, it's just a different color. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and we can put the inside piece on the inside of our card. And when you do that, do a couple of quick checks. Make sure that you have it vertically if you have a pattern that is vertical before you put it down. And you are also opening it to the right. And if you have it vertically, you should be in that orientation anyway. And we're just going to adhere this. This is nothing mystical, magical, nothing super fancy. And you don't need a lot of glue on this either. I'm just going to put a little bit on each of the sides. One of the nice things about a card like this is, even though there are quite a few layers, it's not really bulky because you are using designer series paper on the inside, and that's where the majority of the bulk is going to go. So all I'm doing is I'm kind of raising the right side. I am centering as best I can that piece, and I'm just going to give it a nice little burnish. I'm going to close the card, and I'll give it a burnish again. So you can see how this is coming together. We haven't done the front, and at this point we have some gorgeous designer series paper. We have gorgeous cardstock that really looks nice with that designer series paper. And now we're going to fancy it up a bit. So fancying it up, that means we're going to put some embellishments. We're going to put a nice little frame, and then we're going to do some more things on the inside. And I just wanted to show you a couple of those. I'm going to start with the frame. I like to put frames around die cut holes, and for two reasons. I think it looks more finished, and oftentimes you're going to get a little mark on your paper when you do the die cutting. It's just the pressure of the die is going to cut into your paper. And I just think that a frame is something that looks finished. And if you use colors that are in the designer series paper or part of your card, it kind of pulls it all together. So the way I did this is I took a piece of white cardstock and I put the two dies, these are concentric dies, I put them together, put them right on top of my white cardstock, and I ran them through my die cutting machine. And what happens when you do that is you're going to get two pieces because you're using two blades. And essentially you're cutting two circles, or in this case a scalloped circle and another circle. So these are the pieces that I got when I did that. And I am not going to toss the piece that is on the left because I'm going to use that as well. But I first am going to put my frame on. And I just want to show you the way I like to do this. And I'm sure you have tricks and tips on this as well. I like reverse tweezers to hold things like this. It makes my life easier. I have much more capability of moving this around without getting glued, without really having to get my fingers all messy. And I've put this so that I'm right-handed, as I've mentioned before. This is the part that's facing up. So what you're looking at is what's going to be on the front. And I'm going to flip that over because I do want to put some glue on the back. You don't need a lot of glue. In fact, the less is better. So what you're trying to do is get glue, not even all around. You don't have to have it every single place on the back of this frame. And you don't want major globs because that could ooze out and that will absolutely not make you happy. So I am just sort of putting dots here and there and then spreading that glue out. And one thing I'm going to do before I put this frame down on the card is I have a piece of scrap paper here. I'm going to turn this over. This is the top. The glue is on the bottom. And I'm just getting that excess glue off. I don't want to deal with it. So I'm just taking that off. There will be plenty left on here to adhere to the card front. And what I like to do is I like to get my fingers on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down. And then if I push the frame against the outside of the hole, it's almost like I'm pushing it so that everything is matching up. It's like a reverse puzzle piece almost. And then I can just give that a nice little burnish with my finger. And that is going to be adhered with no problem. And I know we're not done, but even that just looks so much more finished to me. All right, a couple more things, and we will be getting close to being done with the card. So remember, when we cut out our circle, we had a piece of cardstock that came from the card base. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that as part of the design. I am also using the Ladybug punch and one of the stamps, actually two of the stamps. Here's the Ladybug punch, and let me just bring the stamp set back in. It is obviously designed to cut out the body with this, and then these wings with this other piece. Now I'm lazy. I could have stamped the body in black. There is a stamp, this one right here. I could have done that, but I thought, why would I do that? Because all I really need to do is punch it out in black cardstock, and I'm done. I did want to punch out my wings, and I have those. So what I did with those is I stamped the wings using pumpkin pie. That's actually the color of the cardstock that I'm using on the final card that I'm making. So I just stamped those wings on, and I wanted to mention this to you. If you haven't used punches that much, when you're using a punch, it's much more important to look at the back and see how the cutting, where the cuts are going to come from. Why am I saying that? Because when I put the paper into this punch, I want to have my wings stamped so that they're going to fit in really well in that area. I don't want to have them stamped, pretend that these are not cut out. I don't want them stamped right here because that's not going to be super easy to get into. Could I do it this way? Of course I could. But if you think about all you're going to be punching out are these wings, then get it as close to the edge of the paper and orient your stamp in a way that you can just slide it in. Another trick that is nice to know is, let's say that you've gone to the trouble of making sure that you've got your stamp oriented the way you want, and I'm going to intentionally cut this piece of paper to be smaller than it is, but I'm frugal. So I very easily could have cut this piece of paper to punch it. Well, darn it, my fingers are not going to allow me to get that in there and hold that paper. So here's a great tip and trick. Get a piece of Post-it note. This is an extension. And now what I would be able to do is I can put my piece of paper into that punch, and I can very easily move it around and orient it exactly where I want it to be to punch it out, because I have that piece of Post-it note attached to this small piece of paper. Post-it notes, whoever invented those is just a godsend. They are absolutely amazing. Well, I've gone ahead and I put one of my little ladybugs together. I'm going to end up putting 2 on the card. And these are so fun. I mean, come on. You can make the wings any color. I've seen some really, really cool, not ladybugs, but bees that were made out of this punch and these wings, where the person who made them made the body out of stripes of black and yellow. And then the wings were just punched out with vellum and tucked on, just like I did here. So you can, I'm sure, envision how adorable this would be as a bee. You could do the body in black and yellow and then do the wings in vellum. And what I like to do, you can see the difference between the left and the right. I like to curl the wings just to give it a little bit of a realistic kind of look. And I just put glue right up at the tip of the wings, and I'm going to come in and I'm just going to curl those up a little bit using my bone folder and kind of holding the top down so I don't pull too hard or shift if that adhesive is not set really well yet. All right, so I've got my little ladybugs all set. The other thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to put a sentiment on the circle. And the sentiment that I chose is, I just think it's cute, and it fit really well because I dry fit, meaning I did a little model. I just took my punch and I cut out a ladybug using some white cardstock. And that way I could tell where I needed to place my words when I stamped. And I went ahead and I did this so you guys wouldn't have to watch me painfully stamp. So I went ahead and I used the Evening Evergreen and I stamped my friend on that. And that is going to be the sentiment that I'm going to put on the front of the card. And the way that I'm going to do this, and again, this is not a trick, it's more of a tip, is I'm going to use the open circle as the guide, or it's almost like I'm putting a puzzle piece into an open hole of a puzzle. And obvious statement, since I punched this or die cut this circle out of this cardstock, it's going to fit perfectly. But let's think about this for a second. We want this to open, right? So we've got to be careful where we put the glue on this piece, or more accurately, where we put the glue on this piece, so that we don't glue everything closed. I want to be able to open this. And the easiest way to do this, I'm just going to put my bone folder down just so this holds it a little bit. I'm only going to put glue where I see the tulips inside that die. That means that I will not be getting any glue on that left inside piece of Designer Series paper. So it's a great visual as well. And the other beautiful thing about this, you don't need a lot of glue at all. I'm just putting a little bit in the middle. I don't need to do it all the way around the edge. It is perfectly fine. And then what I'm going to do, I'm literally standing up so that I can kind of look straight down at this. And I'm going to try and get my letters straight as well, is I'm just going to put that in like it's a puzzle piece. And that looks good enough to me. Give it a nice little push. And while I'm holding it, I'm going to bring that top piece up. And there we go. Now we have our piece that is glued down. And inevitably, it moves on me. It always does this. So I'm going to make sure that I have it straight. So be patient with this because it might move a tad. There we go. Okay. So now we have that straight. And because I put the glue on the tulips, I know I can open this. Pretty cool, huh? All right, we are almost there. A couple more quick things that we're going to do. One is we're going to put our ladybugs on. And I'm going to bring in the finished card because I'm going to mimic this. I thought it was pretty cute. So I'm going to go ahead and put one of my little bugs right here. And I just want to make sure that the wings are not going to get in the way when I'm pulling that front up and down. And again, I don't need a lot of adhesive. Just put some on the body here. And because I'm using that liquid glue, I will be able to move it around if I need or want to. So I'm just going to kind of orient that in the way that I want it to sit and make sure that it's doing okay, and that looks perfectly fine. So that's where that little guy is going to go. And then I'll put a little bit of glue on this other one. And I'm just going to stick him right down here. Okay, so we've got our ladybugs on here. So the only thing I'm missing when I look at the left card versus the right card is a sentiment on the inside card. And what I wanted to do on this is I wanted to continue to kind of play up the theme of the ladybugs. And you'll remember that when we did the die cutting for the frame, when we used our two circles, the scalloped in my case and the inner circle, we had two pieces. We actually had a circle that we had left. Well, this would be perfect because I can tuck that right up underneath and I can get a sentiment on that. And what I decided to do is I decided to use a couple of the stamps that are in the Hello Ladybug stamp set. I think the "You Can Bug Me Anytime" is the cutest saying that I have seen in a while. And it's just fun. I mean, who wouldn't like getting a card that said "You can bug me anytime"? And I'm not going to restamp this, but I do want to show you how I set up my stamparatus so I can do multiples of these. What I did is I have 3 stamps on my plates. I have the stamp that has the sentiment. I have the stamp that has the outline of the body, and I have the stamp that has the coloring. So the sentiment, the outline, and the coloring. And I took a circle and I just put it onto my grid paper. I drew a circle. I used some washi tape and I put that circle onto the grid paper with the washi tape. So I put it down like this. And then I put all my stamps on my plates. And I can literally just go back and put the ink on and recreate that inner sentiment. And I'll be able to do that because I have several more of the pieces of paper cut. And I have it all set up so that I can just reproduce that image again and again and again. So it's kind of a fun little trick. If you have a particular shape, just kind of draw out a diagram and then you can have your pieces all ready to go, and the stamping is a lot quicker that way. So I have my little sentiment that I'm going to put on the inside, and I'm going to give him a little bit of glue. Again, not a lot, but since this one is going on the inside, I'm going to get a little closer to the edges than I have been. And I'm standing up again because I want to try and get this straight for the sentiment itself. And then I'm going to visually kind of figure out where I want to tuck him behind. And that looks pretty straight. I'm not going to give it a good push just yet until I make sure that it's where I want it to be. And then I'll give it a nice little burnish. And the only thing that is different between these two now are the embellishments that I used on the card on the right. Just put a little bit of bling down at the bottom and a little bit of bling up at the top. But I think this is just a sweet card. It is fun, it is bright. Once you get rolling on these, the design is easy, and oh my goodness, think of the possibilities. Forget the ladybugs. Think birthdays, think anniversaries, congratulations. Sympathy cards, I'm sorry that we have to make them. They would look stunning in a design like this. And you know, if you don't want to have the same shape underneath what you've done for your peekaboo piece, no issue. Cut a piece of maybe white cardstock, and you could put a triangle piece in here with another sentiment down at the bottom, the top, and that would be plenty of place for you to write your greeting. If you do like putting your sentiments like this, you can always put your greeting over here, or you've always got the back of your card that you can use. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching this, and I really hope that you try this technique. It is fun. It's a great way to use up designer series paper. And I also encourage you, if you haven't tried punch bundles, they're so much fun and they're so portable. Whenever we go on vacation, I inevitably bring my die cutting machine and dies and embossing folders and all of that. But if I have a punch bundle with me, I'll use the punch bundle more. It's just more portable. It's so much easier and honestly a lot quicker often. So anyway, enjoy the Hello Ladybug bundle. I hope you really enjoy making this design. I will have links on the video information. If you would like to get any of these products, I will have links for you to do that. If you have a demonstrator right now, please purchase your products through that demonstrator. If you don't have a demonstrator, I would love to be your demonstrator. Send me an email, I'll shoot you a catalog, and I would really love to get to know you. This is just an amazing hobby to get into, and definitely therapy. So thanks so much for spending some time with me, and enjoy. See you later. Bye-bye.